Millions and millions of cars, as you know, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen and many others. And we were restricted from, essentially restricted from selling cars into the European Union, which is not nice.
And with breaking news from the US, where President Donald Trump says he is recommending a 50% tariff on all imports from the European Union. He made the announcement on his Truth social media network.
Yeah, I think this kind of protectionism will only produce losers.
Thousands of German luxury vehicles, BMWs, Audis, Mercedes, Porsches, are now sitting idle at U.S. ports, trapped in limbo as a geopolitical trade standoff escalates. Following President Trump's proposal to impose import tariffs as high as 50% on European cars, Germany's biggest automakers have responded with a quiet but powerful move, freezing or rerouting shipments to the U.S. The result: congested storage yards, confused dealerships, and rising anxiety among consumers. But this moment is bigger than cars. It's a window into what happens when global supply chains collide with nationalist policy agendas and when the costs of political strategy fall squarely on everyday Americans. The current standoff began with a clear, politically charged message: make it in America or pay for it. That's how President Trump framed his latest trade directive, a sweeping proposal to impose import tariffs of up to 50% on European vehicles, including brands like BMW, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, and Porsche. The move was positioned as part of a broader effort to force foreign automakers to shift manufacturing to U.S. soil. But rather than rushing to build new factories, many of these companies have responded by hitting pause, suspending shipments, rerouting deliveries through Mexico or Canada, or holding inventory in Europe altogether. The timing couldn't be more delicate. After a sluggish first quarter, the American luxury car market was beginning to rebound in mid-2025, driven by pent-up demand and easing interest rates. But the tariff threat and the resulting disruption has cast a long shadow over that recovery. Automakers are facing an impossible equation: ramp up domestic production quickly despite cost and complexity, or absorb the tariff and risk alienating U.S. buyers with price hikes. For now, many are choosing a third option, pulling back entirely, waiting for political clarity before committing to long-term changes. What began as an aggressive push for economic sovereignty has now become a high-stakes trade standoff, with luxury car dealers caught in the middle and global automakers weighing whether access to the U.S. market is worth the uncertainty. Across major U.S. entry points, Long Beach, Baltimore, and New Jersey luxury vehicles are piling up, but not because buyers have lost interest. Thousands of cars from German automakers BMW, Audi, Mercedes-Benz sit motionless in port terminals, the victims of a trade policy limbo and logistical overstrain. These vehicles, built to spec and already sold on paper in some cases, are trapped between customs clearance issues, tariff uncertainties, and transport bottlenecks. Port lots are operating at or beyond full capacity, with limited space, dwindling manpower, and no clear timeline for resolution. Staff are facing the almost absurd challenge of managing high-value inventory that can neither be delivered, redirected, nor released for sale, and with every passing day, the cost of inaction grows. Meanwhile, dealerships across the country are feeling the pressure, especially those in urban and luxury-focused markets. Their lots are emptying out even as customer inquiries increase. They can't stock what's technically already in the country, and they can't promise customers when or if those vehicles will be delivered. With each stalled shipment, confidence in the supply chain erodes further. And because these are high-margin vehicles, the revenue loss for dealers is particularly sharp, not just in immediate sales, but in financing packages, lease cycles, and trade-in incentives that depend on a steady inventory flow. The result is a logistics paradox. Finished cars built and delivered across oceans are now immobilized just miles from their final destination. They're visible, they're physically present, but they are economically non-existent. And the ripple effect is increasingly distorting the market. With no new inventory arriving, used car prices are climbing fast, especially for nearly new luxury models, which are suddenly in short supply. In some metro areas like Miami, Los Angeles, and New York, lightly used models are commanding prices at or above original MSRP, throwing traditional pricing logic into disarray. What used to be depreciation is now inflation-driven, not by scarcity of production, but by a failure in delivery infrastructure and policy clarity. What began as a tariff maneuver has now evolved into a system-wide distribution breakdown, one where policy decisions, not consumer behavior or manufacturing output, are dictating price and access. The cars are here. The buyers are waiting. But the infrastructure that connects supply with demand, ports, policy coordination, and institutional trust is no longer functioning at pace. In the luxury market, this breakdown is highly visible, but its implications in cost, in confidence, and in control may reach far beyond the showroom. As the luxury car bottleneck drags on, it's becoming increasingly clear who's absorbing the cost and who's not. For American consumers, the fallout is immediate and personal. Wait times for new vehicles, especially German imports, have grown from weeks to months. Options are shrinking, with dealerships unable to promise delivery dates or offer competitive pricing. Shoppers looking to lease or purchase a new BMW, Audi, or Mercedes this summer are facing a stark choice: wait indefinitely for shipments stuck at port, or pay a steep premium for whatever inventory remains on the floor. The pain is also filtering into the used car market, where shrinking availability of new models is inflating resale values to record highs, sometimes pushing lightly used luxury vehicles above their original sticker price. Dealers caught between global uncertainty and local frustration are equally constrained. With no reliable information from shipping partners or manufacturers, they're watching sales pipelines dry up at the very moment consumer interest was starting to rebound following early 2025's economic softness. Several dealerships have reported double-digit drops in showroom traffic, not because demand has disappeared, but because there's little left to offer. Meanwhile, vehicles already en route, some rerouted through Canada or Mexico in hopes of avoiding tariffs, are accumulating storage and insurance costs parked in port lots or bonded warehouses, and the clock is ticking. Dealers are responsible for holding inventory they can't sell, absorbing costs they can't pass on, and forecasting revenue they can no longer count on. Yet, amid the disruption, a few players appear to be benefiting, at least in the short term. US-based automakers, especially those with active domestic production lines and fewer overseas dependencies, are seeing a temporary surge in demand. Brands like Ford and GM are taking advantage of the import gap to push their premium models to consumers who might otherwise have chosen European marques. But even these gains are precarious. The reality is that many American car makers also rely on global parts sourcing from semiconductors in Taiwan to break components in Central Europe. Any sustained trade conflict or retaliatory measures from the EU could just as easily choke off their supply chains as it has for their competitors. This moment, then, is about more than market dynamics or quarterly profits. It's about the cost of volatility itself, who pays it, who delays it, and who gets to profit while others wait. And it's about a system in slow-motion fracture, one where the economic burden doesn't fall evenly, but instead trickles down from political ambition through corporate calculation and finally onto the showroom floor and the family driveway. In the end, this isn't just about who gets to drive a luxury car in 2025. It's about who's left holding the economic weight of a supply chain and a political system struggling to realign in real time. Facing the weight of US tariff threats, German automakers are now reevaluating their long-standing global production strategies. In response to political pressure and growing port congestion, some are actively exploring the expansion of manufacturing facilities in the United States, a move that could, in theory, shield them from costly import taxes and future trade volatility. But while the idea of building local to sell local aligns with policy goals, the practical and financial realities are far more complex. For starters, labor costs in the US are significantly higher than in Eastern Europe or Mexico regions, where many of these automakers currently operate key plants. Beyond wages, there are regulatory hurdles, zoning restrictions, and limited industrial workforce pipelines. In some US states, especially for highly specialized automotive manufacturing. And even if final assembly lines were set up domestically, most vehicle components, transmissions, chips, sensors, powertrains are still sourced globally from at least 3 to 4 different countries. That makes a true made-in-America car more of a branding exercise than a logistical reality. This exposes a fundamental contradiction at the heart of 21st century industry. Global supply chains were designed for efficiency, not for national borders. Restructuring that entire ecosystem would require not just new plants, but a reinvention of where and how cars are made. So, automakers now face a strategic crossroads: absorb tariffs and maintain global logistics, or invest billions into building localized infrastructure that may never reach global scale, all while consumer demand, political leadership, and economic policy remain volatile. The question isn't whether it's possible to manufacture in America. It's whether the cost of doing so outweighs the complexity of staying global. At first glance, The tariff push looks bold, a decisive move to bring manufacturing home and protect American industry. Build it here or pay the price plays well politically, especially in an election cycle. But as the real-world effects unfold with luxury cars stuck at ports, dealerships left empty-handed, and consumers facing ballooning prices, the rhetoric begins to clash with reality. Is this industrial policy, or is it strategic overreach? The goal of reshoring production has merit, but in practice, it's colliding with the deeply interconnected nature of modern manufacturing. Global automakers and even U.S. firms depend on supply chains that span continents. Trying to force them into a national box through tariffs may sound tough, but if it ends with delayed deliveries, fewer options home, and distorted pricing, then the policy isn't protecting consumers, it's punishing them. So we're left with a difficult question. Is this the path to revitalizing American industry, or a slow withdrawal from the global value chain that has powered affordability and innovation for decades? When markets break down and prices spike, it's not just factories that are affected, it's families, jobs, and the economy as a whole. And if the cure is worse than the disease, maybe it's time to ask whether this is truly strategy or economic self-sabotage in disguise. So, what do you think? Is this the right way to bring manufacturing back to America, or a dangerous misstep in a globally integrated economy? The cars may be sitting still at the ports, but the implications are already in motion for prices for businesses, for consumers, and for the future of how we trade and build. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because while shipments can be delayed, the conversation about what kind of economy we want must keep moving.